everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
And Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, squiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
Right.
And that is exactly what the Conservatives are trying to do today.
Yep.
The Conservatives have found themselves unable when it really counted to side with working people.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron, right here, Question Period Canada. You're here for the Question Period highlights. That's what we have to show. Tuesday was another wild day in the House of Commons. Question Period's always crazy. Trudeau is there, Poilievre's there, Jagmeet, Freeland, Scheer, McKinnon, Lanceman. The whole gang was in the House today and it was off the charts, guys. Let's kick it off. We've got Poilievre and Trudeau going head to head, followed up by Jagmeet. Then we'll get into all the other crazy things. Guess what happened? Chrystia Freeland talks about putting makeup on a pig. How would she know how to do or know anything about that? We're gonna get into it. These are the highlights. Let's go.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
9 years ago, the Prime Minister promised he could spend uncontrollably and there'd be a rich guy on a hill somewhere who would pay the bill. The middle class wouldn't have to pay. Well, what is the result? According to him, the total net worth of the richest Canadians has doubled since he took office. Meanwhile, 9 in 10 middle-class Canadians are paying more tax. Housing costs have doubled, so 76% of middle-class youth believe they'll never afford a home. 2 million people line up at a food bank because they can't afford to eat on a middle-class salary. Given that he already broke this exact same promise over 9 years, why should we believe him this time?
The right honourable
Speaker, if it didn't have real-world impacts on Canadians, it would almost be amusing to watch the Conservative leader tie himself in knots to try and justify voting in favour of advantages for the wealthy Canadians when they sell really profitable investments. We're asking them to pay a little bit more so we can invest more in housing for young people to be able to have the same kinds of opportunities previous generations did. We're delivering dental care for over 200,000 seniors in just the last 6 weeks. We're delivering more spaces in childcare. We're stepping up for Canadians. They're stepping up for the rich.
World impacts. That's what we have today after 9 years of this Prime Minister promising to tax, borrow, and spend us into fairness. But according to the StatsCan data he put out himself since he became Prime Minister, the net worth of the wealthiest Canadians has doubled. Why? Because the taxes he puts always land on the middle class. 9 in 10 middle class people are paying higher taxes. The vast majority of Canadians, and 100% of middle class, are paying higher carbon tax. And his last round of small business tax hikes hit plumbers and electricians, not the rich. Why is it that every time he mentions the middle class, they get poor?
Mr. Speaker, our price on pollution delivers more money to 8 out of 10 Canadians right across the country with the Canada Carbon Rebate. And today, Mr. Speaker, there's an opportunity for everyone in this House to stand up and ask the wealthiest Canadians to pay a little more when they sell extremely profitable investments. We are doing that on this side of the House. The Conservatives will be protecting the advantage that is there for the wealthiest Canadians while we invest more in housing, while we invest more in dental care, while we invest more in Canadians who need it.
If you're a small business owner, you have even $1 of investment gain. Prime Minister is promising, because there's no exemption inside the 300,000 small businesses. And it's incredible that during a housing shortage, he wants to tax home builders. During a healthcare shortage, he wants to tax away our doctors. During a food price crisis, he wants to tax our farmers. And while our economy is shrinking more than any other economy in the G7, he wants to tax our small business job creators. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the definition of insanity?
For 8 weeks since we put our budget forward, the Conservatives have been incredibly careful not to say a thing about the capital gains rate that we're raising. They didn't want to talk about it for 2 full months, and today, when they are choosing to vote with the wealthiest Canadians and against young Canadians who need more housing, young Canadians who need a better break, seniors who need dental care, they're all all trying to spin it in 9 different ways. The reality is they have an opportunity to vote with middle-class Canadians, and they're choosing to vote against them.
Yesterday, the Liberals finally woke up. They realized that it's unfair for nurses and carpenters to pay more taxes than billionaires. Well, clearly they didn't have a problem with that for the past 8 years. So why did the Prime Minister let carpenters and nurses pay more taxes than billionaires for 8 straight budgets in a row?
The very first things we did in 2015 was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower them for the middle class. I will recall that the NDP at that time actually voted against that measure. But right now, we're putting forward a measure to ask the wealthiest Canadians who make a tremendous amount of profits when they sell extremely profitable investments to actually pay a little bit more on those profits so that we can invest in more housing, in more supports for seniors, in a range of things to create fairness for every generation. The Conservatives are choosing to vote against that, and they're standing once again with the wealthiest.
Yep.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
For 9 years, Canadians have suffered from the terrible consequences of Liberal economic policies. And now, what are they doing? For young Canadians struggling to be able to afford to buy their first home, they're raising taxes on home builders. For families barely able to afford groceries and lined up at food banks, they're raising taxes on the farmers who produce the food. And for thousands of Canadians who have gone years without having a family doctor, they're chasing even more doctors away with a new tax on medical professions. How is any of that fair?
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have been trying so hard to fake it. They have been trying so hard to pretend they actually care about working Canadians. But today, there's a vote coming, and they have had to finally pick a side. Today, every single member of this House is going to have to choose. Are you on the side of a nurse, a plumber, a teacher? Or are you on the side of a multimillionaire? And the Conservatives are very clear. They're against fairness. They're in favor of the wealthy lobbyists who advise them.
Member from Thornhill.
Answer again proves that the minister does not read her own briefing notes. When a small business owner retires and sells their assets, the minister wants to take a bigger piece of that because she couldn't control her own spending. Those are the people that the Liberals call rich. They're people like my own father. If he was alive today, he'd be left high and dry in his retirement years, the years where he needed those earnings the most. He started as a taxi driver in this country and went on to invest in a small business year after year in a personal corp because he didn't have a pension. How is any of that fair?
Speaker, squiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig. And that is exactly what the Conservatives are trying to do today. The Conservatives have found themselves unable when it really counted to side with working people. They have been unable to vote for fairness, to vote for the nurse, to vote for the plumber, and now they're evading responsibility for that choice. But we won't let them. We're in favor of fairness, and they...
Every week, I speak to Canadians who do not have a family doctor. How is this fair? The elderly, Canadians with chronic diseases, Canadians with mental health struggles, kids with cancer, none of them can access the healthcare system. How is this fair? And the Canadian Medical Association says things are only going to get worse. They say this tax will jeopardize efforts to recruit and retain doctors. As physicians leave this country en masse, how many Canadians will go without health care due to this NDP Liberal tax grab?
Mr. Speaker, a fair and just tax system won't threaten our healthcare system. What will threaten our healthcare system is eliminating dental care for seniors, is eliminating pharmacare, is cutting into healthcare. And that's exactly what we've seen from the Conservatives. We were able to make over the next 10 years, $200 billion worth of investments with provinces and territories. Those are put at direct risk and jeopardy because of Conservative cuts. And I find it interesting that the only time they've ever asked healthcare questions in this House is when we started talking about fairness and making sure that everybody pays their fair share.
For Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate my honourable colleague's question, but it's important to note that when he and his government were in power, they slashed $500 million at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. They slashed $200 million out of the business risk management programs. And of course, the question I have is how much more would you slash if you ever got the chance to slash? But I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that we have reinstated the funding to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and we have reinstated the funding to the business risk management program. We have and will continue to support farmers in this country, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to remind the Honourable Minister that, of course, questions should be put through me. That's the best way that it should be done. The Honourable Member from Foothills.
Well, it's still not reassuring that the Agriculture Minister still doesn't know that there's going to be a capital gains inclusion rate change that is going to impact Canadian farmers. Farmers who are trying to work hard every day to feed Canadians. And the only thing that this tax change is going to do is feed an obese Liberal government. Exactly. They say this is about fairness, but it isn't fair to young farmers. When they buy the family operation, they are burdened with millions of dollars in debt. This is a gift to the ultra-rich who will buy up family farmland, making mega multinational industrial farms. Exactly. Will the Prime Minister admit this is not a tax on the ultra-rich, this is an attack on the very survival of family farms?
In Nova Scotia fish for our food, risking their lives in the winter. Waves crashing over them, fishing in blizzards and high seas. They risk their lives for 40 years so they can save a little to retire on the sale of their boat and their license. The NDP Liberal latest tax grab on fishermen is to increase massively the tax on the sale of their license, boat and gear even after the fishing exemption. So why do the NDP Liberals think that robbing fishermen of a dignified and honest retirement is fair?
Yeah. To the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 9 years, you know, this Conservative Party has a record. When they were asked to vote to lower taxes on the middle class, what did they say? No. When they were asked to approve a Canada Child Benefit, what did they say? No. When they were asked to vote on child care, on pharmacare, on dental care, what did they say? They said no. Why is it when Canadians look to this Conservative Party to...
From Timmins, James Bay.
For decades, the Mushkegowuk Cree of James Bay have fought to end substandard health and to get a proper hospital built. But now that the deadline is looming for the future of the Winnebago Hospital, the federal government has walked away. If they don't return to the table with funding, the construction companies will quit and provincial funding will evaporate. And all these years of hard work will be lost. The communities and the NDP have called on the Prime Minister to intervene. It's now or never. So is the Minister willing to commit today to flow the funds so this hospital in James Bay can finally be built?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Every Canadian in this country deserves access to health care, and that's why we're working so closely with the hospital, with Ontario, to make sure that residents in the Moosonee area can actually access health care, just like every other person in Ontario. Mr. Speaker, I met with the board yesterday. I met with Grand Chief Fiddler, and the Prime Minister has also written a letter confirming our commitment to this project.
Oh, yeah. And Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, squiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig. Right. And that is exactly what the Conservatives are trying to do today. Yep. The Conservatives have found themselves unable when it really counted to side with working people. Right. They have been unable to vote for fairness, to vote for the nurse, to vote for the plumber, and now they're evading responsibility for that choice. But we won't let them. We're in favor of fairness, and they are not.
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
This fast and furious finance minister unveiled her latest job-killing scheme to screw over Canada's middle class to bankroll her incompetency. Newcomers like my family came here for the Canadian dream, had very little, worked hard, saved money, and started a small business. She calls them tax cheats and vilifies their success. This job-killing capital gains tax hike will destroy their life's work. Hey, they can save it all by canceling their Disney Plus. But before this minister runs away from the mic again, does she think her attack on small businesses is actually fair?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. All right, gang, so we're going to wrap it up. Those are the highlights from today, Tuesday, June 11th. Pretty exciting stuff. Christy of Freeland, how do you know how to put lipstick on a pig? That's a weird thing. Anyways, we'll be back with more highlights, other videos. We cover all the question periods daily. We do that live. It's a fun broadcast. Come and join our chat room. Like, subscribe, share, get notified, all those fun things. My name's Aaron. This is Question Period Canada, learning all about Canadian federal politics, sharing that with you. Hope you enjoyed the highlights. Let me know in the comments what you think. Ciao for now. Catch you next video. Thanks again for watching.